All right. Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
I'm going to go into the screen share, assuming it will allow me to do that. Looks like it will. Here we go. So the Sedra, of course, is Titzaveh, and we actually are, look at this, we're at the fourth Aliyah, sort of the midpoint of the Sedra, and we now move on to a different subject. These, as I said, Titzaveh consists mainly of two subjects. One, the first one that has to do with the vestments of the high priest and the priests, and then now we deal with the actual installation of Aaron and his sons into the priesthood itself, and that's essentially the second part of this parsha. So, V'zeh hadavar, and this is the thing, asher ta'aseh lahem, that you shall do to them, for them, lekadesh otam, to sanctify, to dedicate them, right? Otam lechahen li, to minister to me. So lahem, because that's who we've been talking about. We've been talking about Aaron and his sons. So we have this pronoun, take care of it. Right, so here we go. Lekach par echad ben bakar. Take a bull, a one bull. Ben bakar literally means son of cattle, but the understanding, I believe, because of the ben, right, the son has to do with a young bull, a young bull. Take a young bull, one young bull, the elim shnayim, and two rams, tmimim, perfect. They should be unblemished, in other words. These animals need to be unblemished because they're a gift, they're a donation to God. And so we want to make sure they're as perfect as possible. And again, if you think about it, that the context of these offerings has to do with the relationship, right? That's the underlying thought, that they are there to create a relationship between human beings and the divine. And that's this idea of giving a gift and all the spiritual elements that go behind offering a gift and understanding the tremendous distinction, right? It's ineffable to talk about the distinction between humanity and the creator of the universe. And so this is, in a sense, a great privilege that God is asking us of these things, and that and clearly suggesting then that we are capable of trying to do this and to have a connection, right, to the universe of which we are a part. So Rashi has to do a little bit of grammar work here. So this word lekach, it's unusual. Normally one would simply say kach, take. And what's this lama doing over here? So Rashi is going to explain that to us. That's what's, quote, bothering Rashi, right? He says, kamo kach. It's exactly as if the text had said kach. Ushteg zerotein. He says there are two forms of this verb, right? It doesn't mean, so la in front of a verb sometimes means to understand it as an infinitive, to do, right, to take, etc. But he says it's not to be understood. They're both the same forms of the verb, which is an imperative, right? Achat shel kicha, so one would be a form of the verb kicha, V'achat shel lekicha, and the other one, this imperative form of lekicha, v'lahen pitron echad. But both of them have one meaning. They both have the same meaning, to take. Par echad. So Rashi here gives us the symbolism behind this bull. So what's the bull going to symbolize? Lechaper, in order to atone, in order to atone al maaseh ha'egel shehupar. It's to atone for the sin of the golden calf, which of course was a bull. It's a cattle. So that's what the bull comes as an offering here. It comes to atone for that. in this particular case. And let's go on. He does not explain the Elim, right? He doesn't explain the rams, but we know about the ram of Isaac for sure. Why two rams? Not certain. Rashi doesn't explain it here, but we can count on the fact that these all have tremendous symbolism. A thought that I have possibly is Moses and Aaron. And I know for a fact that very often the bull represents Abraham, because Abraham took a calf to offer to the three strangers, the three visitors. And so we have that association there. And of course, Isaac, we immediately have the ram. And then when we talk about lambs, we're talking about Jacob, that they represent our patriarch Jacob. But the fact that the Elim Shnayim, right? If it was Ayel Echad, then we could go for Isaac. But because it says two, feels perhaps more that it's referring to both Moses and Aaron, and saying, in a sense, the greatest gift you can give anybody is your life. That's the biggest gift you can give.
Well, another, possibility that I
Go
thought
for
of,
it. Yes.
because in the Passover song, two stands for the tablets
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
commandments.
Right. Right.
And the connection with ram is that the ram horn signals, wake up and listen, revelation kind of thing.
Nice. Nice. Very nice, Lauren.
So, maybe it's a
Yes.
reminder of that,
It
of
could be.
revelation.
Yeah, it certainly could be. No, the two is a significant, the issue is, what the significance is of the number two, right? Okay, very nice, thank you. Velechem matzot v'chalot matzot blulot b'shemen. So now we're getting into offerings that are called menachot, meal offerings. So velechem matzot, that would be unleavened bread, v'chalot matzot, and unleavened loaves, lulot bashemen, that would be soaked in oil, urikikei matzot, and wafers, unleavened wafers, meshuchim vashamen, that are wiped with oil. It's from the word Mashiach, right? Anointed with oil, as opposed to blula, right? There's oil that's wiped on them. Solet is the finest flour you can get, and it's solet. You're going to see chitim. It's the fine flour made out of wheat. Ta'aseh otam, you shall make them. Now, menachot. Just some thoughts regarding this. First of all, what is the symbolism? Again, I believe we can go back to that first or second or third chapter of Genesis, where they talk about the creation of human beings, and where in that second chapter they talk about a mist that watered the earth, and the idea of human beings being created from the dust of the ground, and dust being flour, and the mist being the water, and the combination of water and flour to make bread, and the dust of the earth and the water to make human beings. So there is a very strong literary connection between bread and the physical human being. And so that's quite possible that has to do with these meal offerings that are being brought here, that they have to do with humanity. And of course, the bracha, the blessing over bread, where it is hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings forth bread from the earth, is an unusual formulation, because first of all, bread doesn't come from the earth except indirectly from the wheat. Okay, so we can understand it that way. But when it comes to the fruit of trees, we say borei pri ha'etz. We talk about the fruit of trees, because that is what fruit is. And so I think that bracha for bread is actually more associated. There's a suggestion here about human creation as well. because that, in fact, is what happened. God brought human beings out of the combination of the dust of the ground and the water. So again, I think hamotzi, the reason for that formulation has to do with the creation of human beings and that connection. Now, the reason why it's unleavened is because there's you might say, right, within Jewish tradition, there's a well-known understanding that leavening, right, which is this hot air in the pockets of little hot air that the yeast puts into the dough, represents arrogance and the Yetzer Hara also, because very often that is our evil inclination, the inclination that is so narcissistic has to do with a certain level of arrogance that we might well have. And so the idea of these loaves all being without any leavening whatsoever, that they should be unleavened, has to do with the fact that we should come before God, in a sense, devoid of any arrogance. Interestingly enough, there are loaves that are brought on Shavuot, which is the festival of the giving of the Torah, that are in fact leavened. But in that case, it's because they are leavened because there is the preparation that has been done in terms of ridding ourselves of arrogance and understanding the privilege of receiving the Torah and having the Torah as part of what makes our lives pleasant and worthwhile. David, yes.
Yeah, so does that actually mean that the idea of an inflated and deflated ego is got the parallel notion, right?
Interesting. Well, we do, we have this idea of being puffed up. And I
Yeah.
think the idea of arrogance really having little validity because we're here for such a brief time. And even our influence, even if we think that we're dictators of the world, right? Even Alexander the Great, there's this need, right, to have this kind of power, etc. It's so brief and also, in a sense, so anonymous because they were great, great leaders, powerful people whom we don't even know about anymore. Okay. And life itself is so brief. And so it shows the arrogance and the foolishness and the fact that it's really little more than hot air, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it all stems from that. Okay, got it.
It's but we have to be reminded this.
Yeah.
We really need to be reminded of this. Look, there's a lovely midrash that talks about the fact that a person should have if he has two pockets, in one pocket he has one note, and in the other pocket he has another note. Okay. And if he feels arrogant, he puts his hand into the one pocket, and then in that note it says, the worm was created before you. Okay. And then but if he feels depressed and worthless and, feels there's no point to it, right, then he should put his hand in the other pocket. And in that note, it should say, you are created in the divine image. So it's balance, it is absolutely,
Right.
yeah. Anyway, let's go on with the here. So Rashi is going to thank you. Rashi is going to describe a little bit the process and get into essentially try to explain to us what these are all about. But he doesn't, the fact is that the Torah is distinguishing between three types of bread. And again, I have to say that leads me to believe that there's specific symbolism associated with these three kinds of bread, and what exactly they symbolize, that I don't know. I just have a sense that they do, and who knows, one of these days, maybe we'll find out. So here we go. Lechem matzot, so we're saying loaves, right, of unleavened loaves, or should I say bread, unleavened bread. Let's see, challah we're translating as loaves that are unleavened. So I looked in Jastrow the word challah, and he also translates it as rounded cakes. So urikike matzot and wafers, right, that are unleavened. Hare elu shalosh minin. So he says these three types, okay, revucha, right, are saturated with boiling water. That's how they're they're prepared. The chalot urikikim lechem matzot, okay, and the chalot here we're translating it as rounded cakes, urikikin, and the wafers, lechem bread, matzot unleavened bread, he kruya lamata, they're mentioned below, later on here, be'inyan chalot lechem shenem. When it talks, it refers to cakes of bread and oil, right? Al Shem, so we talked about being put into boiling water, but now it sounds almost like bagels, right? That's what you do with bagels. But anyway, lechem shemen, Al Shem, and the reason they refer to there as with oil, shenoten shemen barvucha, because they put oil into this boiling, in the process of boiling it, keneged hachalot urekikim. So it says, apportioned according to the chalot, the loaves, and the wafers. But I'm not saying I'm getting a very clear picture here, but I'm getting a sense, from this, what's going on here, and knowing that there's water and oil as well. B'chol haminim ba'im, and all these three types, right? Eser chalot. They all come 10 loaves. And this is from a tractate called Menachot, which deals with meal offerings. So again, we understand, presumably, why 10, referring to the 10 commandments, I would think, right? And again, why 10 loaves? So if bread represents our physical bodies, our physical forms, and our existence in this world as physical creatures, the fact that we have the 10 is, I think, to inform us that what sustains us, right? What can sustain us as human beings, as these physical human beings, are the 10 commandments. That there's that spiritual element of divine law through the 10 commandments that allows us to thrive as human beings. So I'm playing around with it, and I would hope you would as well, that you can see that this is an opportunity to meditate and to try to come up with, I hope, deeper understandings of what's being asked here. But again, the word that I threw out there was relationship. And my understanding of our belief in God essentially is about trying to understand our place in this world, both as individuals and, I would say, as a people, as members of the Jewish people. So, blulot bashemen, so soaked in oil. Keshehem kemach, so this is what happens. So we're getting a little clarification now of how this is being prepared. Keshehem kemach, when there's still flour, yotzek bahem shemen, he pours oil on them, ubolulam, and mixes them. So what I'm getting here, if I'm not mistaken, is that as flour, they get mixed with the oil, and then I guess they're then thrown into this boiling water, or this water, and mixed with the water there. Interesting, because we know that oil and water don't generally mix, and whether or not this is something about the need for two, and whether, does oil represent one, the Yetzer HaTov, does the water represent the Yetzer Hara, or vice versa? I'm not sure, right? I think oil represents richness and water represents humility. I mean, again, trying to sense the huge literary sense of what's going on here. So, mishuchim b'shemen. So there were certain things, right? This matzot mishuchim b'shemen, that were anointed with oil. So he says, achar afiatam, after they are baked, moshchin kemin kaf, they anoint them with a letter, the Greek letter chai, which is an X, essentially, Yevanit, right? Chaf Yevanit. Yevanit is Greek. Shehi asuya kenun shalana. This is, again, a little bit puzzling, but maybe he had a different, his form of the alphabet was a little different than ours. But it says it is made like our nun. So again, could be a scribal error somewhere in here. It's not translated as a scribal error. It is translated as a nun, but we know a nun looks quite different. Doesn't look, here's an example of a nun. Doesn't exactly look like the X of Chai. So not sure. Not sure where he's coming from on this. And that's it. That's it for verse 2. Let's go to verse 3. V'natata otam al sal echad, and you shall place them all in one basket. V'hikravta otam basal, and you shall bring them near within in the basket. Ve'etapar, together with the bull, ve'echnei ha'elim, and the 2 rams. Take a look at Rashi. V'hikravta otam. So v'hikravta can also sometimes mean to offer them up as a sacrifice. And here it doesn't mean that. It just literally means to bring them in El Chatzar HaMishkan, into the courtyard of the tabernacle, B'yom HaKamato, on the day that it is erected. So I'm thinking that the reason why Rashi feels a need to explain in this way is so that we don't make a mistake and think it means something else in terms of Hakrava and what the associations of that word. Ve'et Aharon ve'et banav takriv, and now you shall draw near Aaron and his sons, el petach ohel moed, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, v'rachatzta otam b'mayim, and you shall wash them with water. Now again, washing can mean different things. So Rashi needs to explain that washing here means a specific kind of washing right over here. Zo tfilat kol haguf. This is referring to the immersion of the entire body. And so we're talking essentially of getting immersed in a mikvah, something like that. Some kind of way in which the entire body is immersed. So again, that symbolism is clear enough. It is purification. That to draw near to God, we need to try to be as pure, both in body and soul, in drawing near. Again, the ideas of what purification symbolizes. So, for example, when you sin, in a way, you feel, we would even say in English, you can feel filthy. That your soul experiences a certain kind of filth, and that it's very degrading. And here we are coming in the presence of royalty and that idea of sovereignty, etc. Going on to verse 5. Velakachta et habegadim, and you should take the clothing, V'hilbashta et Aharon, and you should clothe Aaron, et hakutonet, with the tunic. That's that white tunic, that white undergarment that we saw already. And remember, that came as an atonement for bloodshed. Murder, one of the 3 cardinal sins in Judaism. And again, an atonement for that kind of thing. And sadly, of course, bloodshed is something that is incredibly prevalent amongst human beings. And in the face of divine creation, that human beings are created in the divine image, bloodshed has to be arrogance on the highest level, that you have the right to take the life of another human being. It has to be done. Certainly the Bible seems to accept the idea of capital punishment, but I know that within Jewish tradition, it is only because of a commandment to do it, and also the incredible safeguards that had to be taken in order to prevent it being done with a lack of justice. So, first thing, the tunic, ve'et me'il ha'ephod, and the cloak of the ephod. And the cloak of the ephod, remember, was that blue garment, and that comes to atone for lashon hara, for evil speech. And as I was preparing this, I was thinking of myself, why does this cloak, this blue cloak, represent lashon hara, atonement for lashon hara? And as I was reading the wording of it, in the creation of this garment, it talks about the the mouth of this garment. That's where you put the person's head through this little hole. And of course, it also talks about hashma'at kol. It also talks about the sounding of the bells on the base of the garment, on the edge, the bottom edge of the garment. And so it seemed to me that of all the garments, this is the only one that talks about, sound, and has this word P as well, which means mouth, literally, in its creation. So interesting, right? Just to meditate a little bit, right? The first thing has to do with bloodshed. The second thing has to do with evil speech. And we know how one can lead to the other. We have seen in our time how evil speech leads to bloodshed. So, the ephod, and then the ephod itself, which is a atonement for idolatry. So idolatry really is the belief in false gods, in belief of things that can bring salvation and joy and power and happiness, that are a source of these things, other than recognizing that our divine creator is the ultimate and sole source of these things. So again, how this is worn, it's a back, an apron that, of course, is worn, the apron part of it around the back. The et hachoshin, the breastplate, again, atonement for misapplication of justice. Va'afadata lo, so here's a verb being made out of the noun ephod, right? So you should, perhaps we can say, wrap him. The cheshev ha'ephod. The cheshev ha'ephod was the strap that was part of the ephod, which had the long straps on either side with which he tied himself. I think I'm going to try and show you a picture of that. Let's see if we can. Yes. Okay. Let's go here. This here is the cheshev ha'ephod. Right? Unfortunately, I don't have another picture which shows you how he tied it in front. Okay, but there's the cheshev. That's this strap here. So let's see what Rashi has to tell us. Okay, yeah. So he takes this word afadata, right? That's this verb. Okay, kashet v'takein. So he says you should adorn and arrange hachagura, the belt, v'hasinar, and the apron. So that's the part that is below this belt, svivotav, around him, around Aaron. And we'll stop right here, and God willing, continue next time. So, any comments? All right, very good. And I'll stop the share. And we can stop the recording.
I was wondering why they didn't wear shoes.
A very good question. It is a very good question. Do you remember when Moses approached the burning bush?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
What did God tell him?
Take off your shoes.
Because the ground on which you stand is holy. That's the entire phrase that God said to him. So this is holy ground. And there are many cultures which recognize a sense in which we are connected to the earth on which we stand. And wearing shoes places a barrier between yourself and the earth. And there's a certain level of respect involved in taking off your shoes. And there's also a sense of reinforcing the connection and the fact that we are from the ground. So especially we have that story about human beings being created from the dust of the earth and connecting ourselves then to the dust of the earth and part of our wholeness as human beings. So that could have well to do with the reason why the priests were not allowed to wear shoes when they ministered. And this I will stop the recording here.